scientists don't know what really causes this phenomenon. So this has been going on for a very long time, but every time it happens, the scientists come up with a new fresh explanation for it.
Welcome to Don't Turn Around, a podcast about the extraordinary and the unexplained, and the profound impact these encounters can have on our lives. This is a space for amazing stories and explorations of the human experience as it relates to the paranormal. And if you've got a story and you'd like to share it, well, feel free to shoot me a note at dtapodcastinfo@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. If you've got anything you'd like to say about past episodes, deep thoughts that have occurred to you late at night, well, use that email address because I would love to hear from you. I say it every time, I'm going to say it again. Don't Turn Around would not be possible without the support of my amazing Patreon pledges. Over on Patreon, that's patreon.com/Phil Rossi. You're going to find hours and hours of extras, podcast novels, short stories, paranormal, music. There's a lot of content out there, and there's more content to come. So if you feel inclined, go check it out. And speaking of checking it out, don't forget to check out Old Spirits, the paranormal investigation series that T. Morris and I are doing over on YouTube. That's oldspiritsinvestigations.com. That's the quickest way to get over there. And don't forget to follow Don't Turn Around on social media. And finally, don't forget, you need to leave Don't Turn Around that 5-star review on Apple Podcasts if you haven't already. Apologies, this video episode is a little late in arrival, but I neglected to realize that spring break fell right in the middle of my production window, so that threw things off just a little bit. But here we are with some fantastic stories from this week's guest. Now let's get into that interview. Welcome back, everybody. Tonight's guest has a background in the uniformed services as well as law enforcement, which I'm excited to speak to someone that has these sorts of credentials, commonly fields that we associate with thinking logically and looking for explanations and just being more rational. We'll just put it that way. He is a novice when it comes to paranormal investigation, but that's not to say that he has not had experiences. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation with, as I say, this show is about the human experience. It's about the people in our lives that are our neighbors, our coworkers, etc., because all of us have had something happen at some point. Whether or not we admit that to ourselves is a different story. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on. And it's funny you should mention the kind of the thought process about discrediting or thinking that it's paranormal or not. Mm-hmm. Because I got to thinking about it, and it's funny you should mention it because when I was a child, my very first paranormal, if you want to call it, experience actually came in the form of a dream about my uncle.
Okay.
I had inherited his war journals. Other than reading his journals, he'd passed when I was 5. He served in Korea and Vietnam War full term. And what's interesting is that I was able to describe the pack of cigarettes he smoked while in service down to the letter, as well as part of his DOD ID number, which I had no way of being able to know. So I wrote that off as a dream and discredited it because I was 14 at that point in time, completely discredited it and moved on with my life. Fast forward to 2013, I enter county law enforcement, and we have to fast forward about 2 years after being on the job, and I don't know if you would call it paranormal or not, but everybody knows the science behind how weird the human body is when it's introduced to trauma.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
That's kind of was my introduction to kind of the paranormal is seeing cars mangled beyond all recognition, and somebody literally just walks it off like they're on a Sunday stroll, and then seeing
Yeah.
a car that looks perfectly fine, and you literally just have to drape a tarp over them.
So explain that. You were at the site of a pretty bad wreck, and the person in the wreck, they walked out of the accident.
In this particular case, it was a silver 2008 Nissan Altima versus a log truck. The log truck ran the red light doing 65 miles an hour,
Ooh.
slammed into the driver's side of the
Oh, wow.
Nissan Altima, wrapped it around the front of the log truck. Both vehicles went into the median, and it buried the Nissan Altima to a point inside the dirt mound.
Wow.
And this guy manages to climb out his front windshield and just walk and sit down on the median. To this day, there is no logical explanation to how, minus a fractured arm, a concussion, and some abrasions from the glass. That's it.
That's okay. Now I have a very clear picture, and as do the listeners, I'm sure. I would categorize that as absolutely paranormal. I mean, it's at least extraordinary and unexplained, because when you're just thinking purely of physics and all the kinetic energy being transferred from that truck to that Nissan, from the earth to the Nissan, from the Nissan to the driver, yet there's minor injuries.
Yeah. So there is some science to some of the cases for the logical side of us.
Yeah.
What's kind of interesting is we find the less that somebody anticipates, usually the less egregious their injuries are. You'll see this a lot with DUI cases. The person who's drunk will live. The person who's not will end up being a fatality.
Yeah.
The reason why is when the human body reaction time is slow, the muscles stay loose and limber. So the body's able to absorb more of that trauma and let the energy just pass through them rather than them absorb it and the force get transferred straight to their bones. So
that makes a lot of sense.
Very interesting trauma science to it, and so that's the logical side. But whenever you have somebody sober that literally knows it's coming and then they just walk, science kind of takes a backseat for a minute.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, seeing the wreck and the condition that the car was in, would you say this science of reaction time and loose muscles would have been
he saw
possible?
it coming. We actually had camera footage from the intersection because it's a bad intersection. DOT has a camera there, and what's interesting is you can hear the truck laying on its horn and locking its brakes up.
Oh, man.
Coming into the intersection, and then you just watch it plow into him and just take him out the game.
Wow.
And that's not the only one. There have been motorcyclists, speeds and exit triple digits, eat the asphalt and literally just walk it off.
And it makes me wonder, when you gave that description of sort of how that almost this kinetic energy is almost passing through us when we don't react and our body is just limp, right? And it makes me wonder, what are there other faculties in the brain that our minds have so much control over the matter that it's connected to, right? And so you wonder if even on sort of this instinctual level, our brain knows that when we sustain a heavy impact, that we will be damaged, that we will feel pain. That's part of this like core programming. But if those programs don't have a chance to fire off, in essence, since we aren't accepting or even aware of this reality that we are receiving some serious injuries, that nothing physically manifests.
So I can verify this in multiple ways. There's multiple scientific studies done about people visualizing pain before they react to it. There there's a certain medical condition. I forget the name of it, but there are certain people who physically cannot feel pain. Their nerves won't let them. Famously, I had a math teacher who could pick up boiling water and his body would react to it, but he had no nerve endings in his hands, so he physically could not feel pain.
Yeah.
So that one was interesting.
And if you take that a step further, so he's aware of you touch something hot. And
he's aware that he's touched something warm, but the sensation of pain does not exist in his mind.
Yeah. So I wonder if pain, right, is almost secondary. Your pain is more of a notification system, but the damage sustained is a different subroutine, right?
I'm going to embarrass myself here with an incident that happened with my military career. So we're shooting.
I love a good military story.
So we're shooting 50 caliber machine guns, M2 Browning 50 caliber machine guns, and the barrels, they lock in place on the modern M2 Browning 50 cals. Well, this one barrel got stuck, and I didn't have on heat-resistant gloves. The barrel is burning hot. So I instinctively put my hands on the barrel and the handle and yank it off. Put the new one on. Then I look at my hand and realize that on the hand that touched the raw barrel, the glove is now melted to my hand.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. But what's weird is you don't, because of adrenaline and in the moment, you never feel the pain until your body takes the second to go take inventory almost.
Right. Yeah.
But a little bit more into the normal paranormal, there is another very distinct event, and I've mentioned this on T's channel before, the warehouse incident.
I've heard of it by name, but I that's all I know. I know that there was the warehouse incident, and I've been waiting for this conversation to be able to ask you about it. So let's hear about the warehouse incident.
So the warehouse incident starts at about 1:45, 2 o'clock in the morning. Me and my partner have just sit down to eat Waffle House because that's all that's open in a rural county at 2 o'clock in the morning. We had just sit down, and all of a sudden, hot call comes out that an industrial alarm has gone off. We know the property's abandoned. However, people like stealing the copper and everything else.
Of course. Yeah.
So we're just like, all right. We get up, we ditch our food, we head out there. Now, bear in mind, these sensors are triggered by motion. That's the only way they are triggered is by motion, and they're calibrated to where something has to trip. So there's multiple infrared lasers. An animal will only pass through the bottom one because of its height.
Right.
It takes something at least 3 feet tall has to pass through the lasers in order for it to trip the alarm to account for animals.
Okay.
So that's why we didn't accredit it to an animal, because this security system was actually fairly advanced. It wasn't your run-of-the-mill. So we roll out there, and bear in mind there are 2 patrol cars. I'm in a Crown Victoria. My partner's in a Dodge Challenger. We both roll up. We park basically in a V and put our spotlights out to cover the approach. And we both get out. We get our flashlights out, and we're just bullshitting, going, yeah, this is probably just another false alarm. Well, all of a sudden, both me and him see it at the same time. It's a shadowy figure, medium build, and we see it dart across, and we hear the sound of metal pipe hitting the ground. And both me and him are like, okay, you take one side, I'll take the other side. We'll pin him in, because there's an 8-foot security fence with barbed wire around this entire property.
Okay.
He's not going to get out without hurting himself. So we both take turns. We slowly push forward, clearing everything out. And we find nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah, nothing.
And there's no way. There's a
Minus
single
the
point of
disturbed
entry.
pipe
Yep.
and the disturbed alarm. Everything else on the property is fine. There are no footprints. We checked. And what's even crazier is that the camera on our patrol cars both picked up the shadowy figure at the back of the property.
Wow. Now, from let's say what you saw with your eyes, I mean, was it solid?
Yes. So it was like a shot.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like the light was passing through something
Mm-hmm.
and casting a shadow back on the wall behind it.
Oh, interesting. Do you have that footage? Were you able to?
No, unfortunately, that has been lost to the records of time. I did put in a public information request with my county's department, and they informed me that footage has since been deleted.
Bummer, but that's fine.
Believe me, I did try. I did actually try for this. I knew this was coming, and I knew you would ask. But
hey, that's okay. That is okay. So, and I'm trying to imagine this property, and you did a good job of describing it. I see you're a good size. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, why don't you break it down?
It's an old, rundown industrial complex that used to house a robotic assembly line for assembling car parts.
Okay.
So it's basically a giant steel industrial building at its core, with nothing on the inside. So it's just barren concrete pillars on the inside, nothing on the inside. And then outside where we were looking, they have a old overhead shed where they used to put the roll-up dumpsters, because the EPA requires you, if you've got roll-up dumpsters, to have that overhang to prevent runoff.
Okay, yeah.
So, and on the back side of that is a corrugated steel wall that lines that entire shed, minus a door that's on the back side of that shed, which is the only way this figure could have left.
Yeah.
So when my flashlight hits the corrugated steel, it's basically just like a human, like 5'8", 5'10", medium build, nothing crazy or definitive about it. It looks like just a generic human figure on the back wall.
Yeah. Wow. And as far as the warehouse itself is concerned, I mean, is it left unlocked?
No,
or
it was
locked?
fully locked up. The only thing that was unlocked was the gates on the outside. The gates on the outside were unlocked.
Yeah.
But it had no trespass all over it.
Of course. Now, let me ask, it was locked when you got there?
Yes.
Yes? Wow.
It gets a little bit more interesting when you consider the history of this building.
All right, let's hear it.
So, like I said, this building used to make industrial car parts. The company went bankrupt after a series of accidents involving the robotics and the maintenance team, where 2 maintenance workers were killed when the machinery malfunctioned.
Oh, wow.
The lawsuit that followed bankrupted the company because the company was found at fault for negligence in training the maintenance personnel, and the business shut down. They liquidated all their assets, and to this day, that property is still barren.
Wow. So you've got some corroborating history that would at least indicate some better chances to experience something out there. Now, let me ask you this. So in that moment, when you initially saw the shadow, or rather the shadow casted right on the corrugated steel, was your initial instinct was, okay, we have someone on this property?
Yeah, that was our initial thought. We thought, okay, we've got crackhead, meth head.
Yeah.
We've got somebody doing drugs, somebody homeless maybe.
Mm-hmm.
That's the weird thing, and we have this saying in law enforcement: there is no such thing as an ordinary call. It can be something very mundane, and it goes 0 to 100 instantaneously in a flash. So, but yeah, that's kind of what we assumed. We just assumed that it was somebody looking to salvage And we were just like, okay, let's just get this guy off the property, write him a trespass notice, get him out of here before he gets himself hurt,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
be done with it. And then we find nothing. And then me and my partner, we just kind of write it off as, okay, maybe we didn't see. And that's where we went back to the camera footage.
Yeah.
And then we were like, okay, we saw something. We can't explain it. And then we just kind of buried it at the bottom of our reports. And the way that we typed it up was saw figure run out back door, was unable to locate. And then we have what's called 1066, which means you terminate the call because it's unfounded.
Yeah.
So we just decided it isn't worth our time to go out here searching for 30 minutes looking for something. And nothing else was disturbed. The building was still locked, and we were just like, okay, whatever. Call the alarm company, terminate the alarm, and then move on.
What I find interesting is your and your partner's initial reaction upon finding the property empty was, well, maybe we didn't see anything, or at least didn't see what we thought we saw. And that was the initial instinct, rather than, which makes sense to me, that, oh, we saw a ghost, right? Because again, especially in your role, your brain's going to be going through all the possible, rational explanations before you get to unexplained and before you go anywhere further. So after you buried it in your reports, did you and your partner talk about this anymore?
Off and on, like especially like the week after, me and he used to poke fun at me. You see any more ghosts lately? Like he used to this day. He still gives me some hell about that particular call, because he still works for that same agency.
Okay.
So it's kind of turned into a comedic point.
Of course,
yeah.
No, I get that. So the call, you end the call, you go about your business for the rest of your shift. You get home. Does it cross your mind again? Are you still trying to process?
I mean, it's still, for a while there, it still regularly processed me. And what's funny is in daylight, the following day at the start of my shift, because I worked the night beat. So while I still had sunlight, I actually went back out to the property and tried to find footprints, anything like that, anything that would indicate anything normal, tatters of clothing. Couldn't find shit.
Yeah, that's wild. Now, would you say this was somewhat of a defining moment for you?
It definitely stood out in my mind, and I won't lie, with the rest of my background, I literally just tossed it to the back of the bin and was just like, okay, one-off freak incident. Throw it in the back of the bin. Business as usual. And then we fast forward to OSI, which is where you guys conveniently come in.
Yes. So that was going to be my next question. What was the pivotal moment where you decided to resurrect this memory and become more interested in seeing exactly what's going on out there?
The TWI flight video and investigation that you guys did at OSI was kind of the defining moment, because I was there for the live streams where you guys were doing your investigation. I heard about the more hostile atmosphere. And I was like, okay, I have something that kind of relates to this. Warehouse incident becomes a thing on T's channel. I mention it to him. He's like, wow, that's kind of interesting. You should probably talk to Phil. We finally get around to this conversation. And then I decide, about a month later, okay, I'm going to buy an Olympus EVP recorder.
Nice.
I'm going to take my body camera, and I'm going to go to a local spot that I know has some nice potential.
Yeah. Reports of activity, right?
Yeah, which is my first and only investigation.
Okay.
Which is the Royal Palm and Ponce de Leon train wreck little bit of history about this train wreck. Occurred in between Rockmart and Cedartown, Georgia, located in Polk County.
Okay.
In December 23rd, 1926. There were 19 people who were killed and well over 50 injured. The exact number is unclear. Depending on which source you go with, that number is as high as 93 or as low as 41, depending on the news media source, newspaper that you pull from.
Got it.
What's kind of interesting is that it's kind of a perfect storm. The official report that was released is that if you follow the railroad track back, the Royal Palm missed its siding that it was supposed to go on.
Okay.
Due to intense fog and intense rain.
Okay.
It missed its siding. It then didn't see the signal at the end of that siding, blew clean through it, and carried on. Once it passed that signal, fate was predetermined from the beginning because there is no siding or sidetrack all the way to the point of where they met.
Yeah.
The rails for the crash site still run the exact same route that they did back in 1926.
Really?
Yes. So the siding has been extended that the Royal Palm blew through, but there's an overpass that actually goes over that now.
Okay.
And that area is still there. The signal is still in the same location, and if you follow the railroad track all the way down, it follows the exact same route, except it shifted according to CSX records. They had to shift it about 18 feet west due to a property right dispute with a local farmer. Other than that, the rails are in the exact same location that they were in 1926.
And so this was the spot where you decided, why don't I give it a shot? What inspired you? I mean, aside from the OSI episode at TWA, where was this? Because I love hearing about the thought process, especially for people coming into it later or unexpectedly. Yeah, what was the switch?
Growing up, so the switch for going on this investigation in particular was a combined interest of the TWI investigation. And as a child, I loved trains, so I knew the local history.
Okay.
And I decided to put the two together because,
of course,
what's interesting is there used to be a local train depot. It's no longer there. CSX tore it down in 2012. I actually have notes.
I love you've got notes. You've got notes. You're no novice.
Yeah, like I said, back in 2012, CSX unfortunately tore the original train station down that was in my hometown. That was the final destination that the Ponce de Leon was supposed to arrive to.
Wow. Okay.
And never did. What makes it kind of interesting is the community response, because if you look up any photographs of this train wreck, what's really striking is you're not going to see many uniforms. All you're really going to see is a bunch of community members coming out there on a cold Christmas Eve morning and spending their entire Christmas Eve rendering aid to victims and helping out with this wreck. And it, again, kind of unlucky for the passengers, is the reason why it was so bad is that there was a dining car behind a sleeping car on one of the trains. I forget which one off the top of my head. But these cars back then are made out of wood, not steel.
Right.
So the dining car went inside the sleeping car and telescoped.
Oh, wow.
With the dining car literally resting inside of the sleeper car. That's where the majority of the fatalities occurred.
Unbelievable.
And there's tons of pictures. I can send you a few.
Please do. I can show them on the... that'd be great. Yeah,
I've got those photographs from the train wreck, from the research that I did trying to locate as close as I could to this exact site. And what's funny is that I have to give a huge shout out to CSX Railroad. I have to give them a huge shout out because this poor lady who humored my historical records request. God bless her soul.
I love that, though.
She actually went through the archives and actually found the original railroad incident report that was submitted.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
And gave me the transcribe of it.
Really?
And the investigative process that they went through. And what made it so easy to find is they had mile markers.
Of course.
All I had to do was take out a GPS on Google Earth, draw a line from one spot to another, and literally do the math. And it put me within a 50-yard cube of the exact location.
Yeah, you were prepared. You had the plan. So now comes the execution.
So execution is first getting permission because it's CSX's property.
Mm-hmm.
I have to get permission from CSX Railroad to be out there in the first place.
Of course.
That actually went surprisingly easy. They actually approved my request with the limits being I was not allowed to stand on the ballast. So the rocks that make up the bed of the railway.
Yep.
I could not stand there. I had to keep a 5-foot gap between the ballast and where I was standing at any given point in time. Beyond that entire field and area around there, I was free to do what I pleased, as long as I didn't trespass on the farmer's land.
All right.
So that was easy. That was
Good.
as simple as shooting an email and being like, hey, I'd like to come out to this specific location at this specific set of times. And they were like, great, don't do this, and you're good. Going beyond that, I had my body camera, which didn't really capture anything, minus cricket audio and my occasional flashlight.
Oh, so you went out there at night as well?
Yes. So I went out there in the day.
So you went to the daytime and then you went back at night.
So
yes, you learned nothing from the TWA video.
Correct. So
mad respect.
Me and a close friend of mine both went out there both times. We went out there during the day. We got nothing. It was a complete dry hole, and I was kind of like, okay, this is part of the investigative process. This is a dry hole. Oh, well, it's still a learning experience. We're still getting a dry run of doing this and going over what to look for. And then we're just like, okay, nighttime, because I decided to match the time of the train accident.
Of course you did. I love that.
Which very conveniently, actually, what's interesting is back in the day, to get the time of the wreck, they did the math of the average speed of the train when it passed the train stations of its last recorded points.
Oh, wow.
And then they manually did the math of average speed to actually calculate the collision speed that they wrecked at, as well as doing the math for everything else. So,
that's fascinating.
Yeah, so back in the day, they didn't have all these high speed tools.
The thing I love about the details that you're providing, especially in terms of the history, because you know how we feel about history, it really makes it feel very real. And I'm sure that's coming through folks' earbuds, but I have a very strong sense of the location of the incident. And so keep going, because you're doing great.
So to kind of work my way into this night investigation. So it's the very early hours of the morning. It's rainy, foggy, December 23rd, 1926. People are traveling so this line, both trains, they're mirror trains. So they run the same route, just on opposite schedules.
Right.
Just so happens that this area was their meeting point where they were supposed to pass each other on this particular day. Both trains were loaded full of families trying to make it home for Christmas morning. both trains were fully loaded. Sold out. Like, completely sold out. Both trains were filled. How this didn't end up being more of a disaster is actually kind of a miracle in and of itself.
Yeah, I was going to say.
So, both trains leave. There's this straightaway. If you look at Google Maps, I'll send you these images, but there's a straightaway where both of the trains would have had to curve, and then there's this long straightaway. That straightaway, if you look at the historical photos, is exactly where the wreck occurred, is on that straightaway.
Yeah.
Now, determining exactly where, physically impossible. That's
of course
lost to history. But that straightaway is kind of the subject area.
Okay.
And they had time to slam on the brakes, because the brake cylinders on both locomotives in the investigation were found to be full. Both of them were had full brakes applied, and the throttle all the way out. So they had enough time to react, but not enough time to prevent the inevitable.
Right.
Which is kind of the crazy part when you think about it, because that means the engineers on both trains had enough time to realize what was about to happen, react, and then just accept what was about to happen to them.
Yeah, which is, it's hard to fathom what those moments must have been like, knowing that they weren't going to be able to stop their trains, and it was happening. It
gets a little bit even crazier, because the distance between this stretch of railroad and the nearest town is 9 miles in either direction. They literally crashed just about smack dab in the middle of the county, in between Rockmart and Cedartown, the two towns in the major towns in the county. They literally just about split the difference. So it's about 9 miles in either direction to the nearest hope of aid.
Yeah.
And there's just people in the photographs you can see with farm trucks, literally buggies, literally anything they could manage to load up people to get them to a higher level of care.
Wow. And so this is where you're going.
Yeah, and
nighttime.
This is where we lead up to my part, because I decide that going there at between the hours of 3 and 6 a.m., where the accident happened, would be a fantastic idea.
Hey, to me, it sounds like a great idea. T might have a different opinion. My wife might have a different opinion, but I think that sounds like perfectly planned.
Me and my buddy are just sitting out there talking to the void, and at this point, we're kind of discouraged, because in the moment, we're hearing nothing but the nice crickets and nature, and we're just sitting out there going,
what are we doing?
Yeah, we're both idiots. And we kind of have this back and forth moment, and we're asking very generic questions. Is anybody out here with us? Please make yourself known. Sight or sound. Just because at that point I didn't have a flux too.
Okay, yeah. So you
after this investigation, I went and got one.
Okay, good man. So you're going down the basic catalog.
Yeah, I run through
questions,
these basic generic questions, and then I get to more specific ones because I had the casualty list.
Yes. Okay.
And I start asking for people by specific name. What's very interesting is that there is a man whose actual name is kind of lost to time, but according to the train records, Frost is the only name listed on his passenger manifest. What's interesting is I get down to his name, and there's an EVP reaction.
That you didn't hear at the time.
We don't hear it at the moment. We only find it afterward. But there is a very distinct EVP reaction with him. What's disturbing about his EVP reaction is it's not words. It's more like mutilated grunts, like you would hear of somebody in agony or pain.
Oh, Wow.
Yeah. So we ended up getting 2 more.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to look. Help and hurt were the 2 words that we got out. Which, given the nature of this, is
Again,
not surprising at all.
Yeah, it corroborates. It matches the history of the location.
And I still wanted to be skeptical.
Of course.
Because a lot of the grunting and grunting noise I wanted to write off. Luckily, we got a baseline to test. So I used the EVP recorder whenever we had a train go by during the daytime and took those sounds and put it on a soundtrack. That way I could play it back. Stand in roughly the same spot.
Yeah.
It's basically a way of determining what's the train versus what's something different. What's triggering something different.
Yep.
This kind of ties in very interestingly with your guys' Candy Factory.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I watched that episode with the REM pod, and the skeptic in me wants to say something about that trains have radios in them.
Yeah. Of course.
And those radios' frequency, and that was the first thing that popped to mind, and eliminating that as a variable would be hard with the...
exactly. And that brings up a great point, and particularly with trains, because we've had, as you know, different activity in areas with trains as trains go through. I just think since it's so difficult to be able to duplicate, right, in a controlled environment I don't know anyone that owns a train, but I think we just need more data. And I think the times where we are not getting anything off the devices.
Yeah, that spoke volumes to me, where you guys included that second clip where you got nothing when the train went by. That was invaluable to me.
And there's a couple other spots that we investigate where trains go by fairly closely, where we haven't gotten any hits. And then there's a couple spots where the train might be a little bit more distant, where you wouldn't think that sort of RF radio frequency would interfere, and then we get a hit. So, but more data. I mean, for things like that are difficult to debunk, but there could be a rational explanation for. I'm of a mind of just really making sure we're paying attention when things aren't going off.
See, because that's what I want to do. I want to invest in a REM pod, and then I want to go back out there with all the gear and the knowledge gained.
Yes.
Go back out there and revisit this again.
I think that's a great idea. So when did you go out there? How long ago was this?
This was towards November of last year.
Okay. So November of this past year, and then we kind of get into the winter time. So is it more of a seasonal reason why you haven't been out to investigate?
It's been time, unfortunately, since I do my own private work now with the firearms industry. Unfortunately, business for me, unfortunately, has picked up to where it's limited my personal availability.
Of course.
To be able to go out and do anything. So unfortunately, my hands have been tied due to scheduling.
And I totally understand and appreciate that. It takes time to go out. It does. It's an investment of time, and sometimes it's hard to invent that time. But you do intend to go back.
Yes, and then there's looking forward into the future, which very interestingly, we have permission from a site that is not in the United States. It's called Camp 30 in Canada. Me and another military buddy of mine are planning a trip to an old POW camp, German POW camp located in Canada.
Wow, that's amazing. When is this happening? Do you have a date yet?
This coming May, we have plans to go up there. We had plans to go vacationing anyway.
Make it a paranormal vacation. That's what I always
say. So the plan was to go to Ontario because he lives in Canada, and he's a military buddy of mine who serves through the Canadian military, and we're like, hey, we need to meet up again. Hey, my schedule is going to free up in May. Hey, my schedule conveniently is also open in May. hey, let's take these 2 weeks and let's go get drunk and have fun.
And look for ghosts.
And then I brought up on a whim, I'm like, don't you still have this camp nearby? Because it's a historic site. It's registered by the Canadian government as a historic site for preservation. Unfortunately, as of 2019, it was sold to a home developer who's been trying to get it taken off the historic site list so they can demo it and turn it into housing.
I see.
They've been caught in litigation, though, making no money off the property since 2019. So all we had to do was go, hey, we'll give you this small amount of money if you'll let us poke around on your site for an evening. And of course, they were like,
so you we'll make a donation, right?
Pretty much. And conveniently enough, they decided to give us permission. The only request is that we have to check in with their on-site security. They do have a security guard who patrols that area because it's been vandalized so much over the years.
I'm sure. I believe it.
So all the historical artifacts are unfortunately long gone. The buildings
of course
ransacked and vandalized. There's only one building still standing that's structurally sound enough that where we're actually going to be able to enter it. The rest of the buildings have all been condemned. So looking forward to the future.
That's exciting. To back it up a little bit, when you were listening through your recorder's files, when you heard those EVPs, in particular, the ones that were clear enough that you could make out words, what happens to you in that moment?
Chilling. It's the first time it's definitely chilling because in the context that I'm used to hearing those words, it's somebody who is actually needing aid.
Right.
So it triggers, when I hear those words, it instinctively triggers those kinds of responses and thought processes in my head. And it's so weird going back and playing the video footage and hearing nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then line it up with the EVP footage and it's crystal clear.
Yeah. Yeah. And in that moment, so you have that initial, that just chilled feel. And then what conclusions did you eventually reach after you listened through and you chatted with your buddy?
After the investigation, in the famous words of OSI, you're haunted.
Yeah. Nice. You get bonus points for that.
So we definitely concluded that there is at least something, or at least one or two residual entities that are there.
Okay.
Well, unfortunately, until we go back with the Flux, the REM pod things where we can ask easier ways maybe for more options for interaction, we might get better results. Unfortunately.
And let me posit this to you as well. In our experience, it almost seems that the more you do it, the more you get out there in the field and investigate, the more things start to happen. At least that has been our experience. And I do feel that it's like learning to play a musical instrument or if you don't have perfect pitch, getting better, improving your pitch, right? Or whatever, but it's kind of conditioning your brain to process reality in a bit of a different way.
So, kind of interesting you should mention about pitch, because when we asked more responder related questions, if anybody's here, make yourself known by sight or sound.
Yeah. Yeah.
When we phrased questions that way, that's where we got our responses more, was when we phrased the questions more in a more serious or relevant tone.
Yeah.
We definitely got a stronger response.
And that's interesting. I'll have to think about that a little bit.
Language was another interesting one because my friend knows fluent Spanish.
Okay.
he tried asking questions in Spanish. In this case, we didn't get any hits, but it's another reason I'm looking forward to going to this German POW camp. I speak a little bit of German. I am
Perfect.
actually and I have heard of you guys using language before.
We have, with interesting
Which
results, with
I
very
have to
interesting
ask,
results.
and this is kind of reversing the interview a little bit, but I have to
That's
ask,
fine.
what is your experience with language and bringing out a different result?
So, and again, I'm going to say, before I can say anything definitive about it, we just need more data with using language. But we have had occasions where we have said a particular question in French, for example, in an area where we knew there would be some French soldiers were involved in combat, and we have gotten responses in French. With very French sounding accent. We've had other results come through the spirit box, that a German, for example. So it does seem like there is some correlation between language and the responses you may get. I am on the fence about this theory that after we pass, there's universal language, right? This universal language. And I think maybe with certain strong emotions, maybe that it will be translated into our language that we understand. But I also think that, if we are saying that there are intelligent hauntings, why all of a sudden would they be able to just converse with us in our native tongue? And again, I have other thoughts around why that could be, and I could go on, and I won't.
So I'm also kind of nervous about the POW camp trip, because as your prison trip revealed, being prior in law enforcement and being a part of the military and having a very strong English voice.
Yeah.
I am very interested to see, interested and slightly
A little
cautious.
nervous. Yeah, that's smart. That's good. It's we call this
because going into their domain looking for a response. I know I'm going to be tempted, and curiosity will kill the cat here.
Of course.
Because I want to use those phrases to try to invoke a response. Unfortunately, digging for gold. But I'm nervous that when I strike that gold, what am I going to get?
What's that gold going to look like? Yeah, that's a totally rational concern. I think it's going to take a delicate approach. You're really going to have to choose your words well. And you're not going to be getting any real-time, well, potentially you won't be getting much real-time feedback if what you're saying is getting through or is going to elicit a response because you're using the right amount of respect or you're asking the right questions. But it's going to be exciting, and I'm pumped for you. I cannot wait to hear all about that. So May, you said May.
Yes,
so maybe
May.
we can we'll have you back on the show in June or July and follow up and we can compare and contrast your first investigation experiences, if you'd be up for that.
I'd definitely be down to compare and contrast, because there's a lot of learning and research that I've put into this. I don't know how well that may have come across, but when I did this first investigation, I was so nervous.
Which is normal.
About getting nothing. I was so scared about getting nothing. And unfortunately, that's one thing I will say that everybody needs to go. Anybody who wants to do paranormal investigation needs to go in with the mindset that you're going to get nothing.
Absolutely.
It's like fishing. Absolutely. You should go there for the experience.
100%.
Not the results.
For you, what was this fear based in? Was it fear that it was going to be a waste of time, or a fear that, okay, maybe these things really aren't happening out there? What was the fear for you?
Actually, the inverse. So what's kind of interesting is that my fear, always is that you bite off more than you can chew.
I see.
Because this is the realm of the unknown, which kind of ties in conveniently to how I was going to answer your
Oh yeah. We'll get there. We'll get. It's almost time to ask that question.
So, but the unknown is what everybody fears naturally as a human being, and this is the realm of the unknown. This is almost like science fiction coming to science.
Yeah.
You are riding the line of science fiction meets science.
Yeah.
Trying to find the nuggets to bring back to formulate theories and bring back results.
Yeah.
That's the exciting part. The downside is what happens when you get the unexpected result in the experiment almost blows up in your face, and you're like,
oh yeah.
For example, the TWI flights with you guys, and you guys getting a hostile response. That was my inevitable fear, was worrying about getting a negative or hostile response, and me being very novice and new to this, not knowing how to deal with the aftermath or the cleansing process.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah, I wish I had done more research into that.
Which is important. Well, before your next trip, you better do some more research. And we have some good resources. You reach out to OSI and we'll get you on the right path there. But Matt, I can't believe that it's almost been an hour already. This conversation has absolutely flown by, and I'm already excited to hear about this second investigation. But it's that time of the show where we ask the question. Are you ready for the question?
Yes, please ask me this question.
Matt, do you turn around?
Yes, and with enthusiasm, as a matter of fact. Like I was saying, this is exploring the realm of the unknown, and my hope in getting into this is to develop an understanding that I can help pass on to others, and if I can even in some way convey a message that helps somebody or something find peace, then even if it's just one, it's the same mentality as saving somebody's life. Even if it's just one, it's made the entire thing worthwhile.
That is a great answer. Matt, thank you so very much for joining me for this discussion. And thank you to everyone out there who is listening to Don't Turn Around. If you are enjoying what you hear, make sure to swing by Apple Podcasts, leave the show a glowing 5-star review so as many people as possible can hear great stories like what Matt has shared here on the show today. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Don't Turn Around Podcast. And we'll see you next time.
We just don't know what really causes this phenomenon. So it's been going on for a very long time, but every time